What's up, everybody, and good evening. We are having an impromptu special edition of the Muzzle Off podcast tonight. I know I typically air on Wednesdays, but um, in lieu of some issues that we had, last week, we decided to come on tonight. Um, and I believe that we probably couldn't have picked subsequently for a lack of better terms, no better time as this to really discuss, um, honestly, criminal justice reform, police reform, prison reform, all of the reforms that we honestly do need in this country, gun reform. Um, I don't exactly know when we will officially get tired. I don't know when we will exactly officially say enough is enough, but I think it's time now that we begin to have an open and honest conversation and that we begin to become a lot more educated in what exactly is going on within the criminal justice system, with policing in America, even with gun reform. Why we call for gun reform, why we're even calling for the defunding of the police. I just think that it's time that we begin to have an open and honest conversation about it. And one of the things that I don't believe in is I don't believe in having an ignorant conversation about anything. I believe in having a informative conversation. So I wanted to bring someone on the platform that is informed, that has been working. Within criminal justice reform for years, someone that has assisted, someone that has helped. So, Lewis, please introduce yourself. Allow people to know exactly who you are, what you stand for, what you represent, why. Just let them know exactly like who you are.
Yeah, well, first and foremost, I appreciate you having me on. Like my grandmama used to say, better late than never. I think that the timing of this conversation is extremely sensitive, and I think that it's also timely as well, considering that we are full throttle in the middle of the Derek Chauvin trial killing of George Floyd. Just 15 miles up the road, as recent as within the last 36 hours, you had a 22-year-old, 19-year-old, I'm sorry, 19-year-old, uh, I don't, child, and from my vantage point, lose his life, not because he was participating in a drive-by shooting, not because he was gang related, not because he had an AK-47 assault rifle and aimed it at the police. He was pulled over because he had an air freshener on his mirror. And from what recent accounts of the situation is saying, that the officer may have accidentally discharged his firearm. And when you compound that, we just saw a lieutenant, second lieutenant in the United States Armed Forces, not just pepper sprayed, but essentially um, manipulated, for lack of a better term, um, manipulated out of filing a complaint against the officer, under the guise that if he did do so, the officer, he himself would have been arrested. So when you ask me to introduce myself, who I am is not as important as what it is that I do.
Mm-hmm.
What I do is I try to fight for those whose voices are diminished due to excessive prosecution and disproportionate sentencing. What I do is try to lift up and amplify the families of those voices who have been killed by law enforcement
Mm-hmm.
officers, people who are sworn an oath to protect and serve our communities. And so formally, my name is Louse L. Reed. I served nearly 14 years in federal prison, and I have been in the space of criminal legal reform movement for, arguably about 5 years now. But again, who I am is not necessarily as important as the work that I'm trying to do.
Explain to us the work that you are currently doing, because I think a lot of us, we hear criminal justice reform, we hear prison reform, we hear the terminology, but for people that are not very close to it, and are not well versed in it, what does it actually mean when we say criminal justice reform? What are we trying to reform?
Well, I mean, look, I always tell people like that the criminal legal system is like a 2-year-old trying to wrap her arms around a full-grown elephant.
Mm-hmm.
It's too big, it's too massive. It has grown years in advance. And so when we think about what criminal legal reform is, essentially there are a multiplicity of different components to it. You have dignity for incarcerated women. You have, essentially what that means is that you have the folks who are trying to change the conditions of confinement for women who are incarcerated. You have people who are involved in sentencing reform. And essentially what their perspective is that just because a person has been convicted of a crime, doesn't necessarily mean that person should have the book thrown at them. You have people who are involved in sentencing reform. Sentencing reform, falls within the same category. You have people who are involved in juvenile justice. Those are the folks who are ardently attempting to push, to get juveniles from juvenile life, and trying to push back, I should say, push back the age requirement for kids, juveniles, to be charged as adults in some states. You have people who focus on crack cocaine disparities,
Mm-hmm.
who focus on the death penalty, et cetera. So, that's it from a nuanced perspective. But from an overall perspective, it just simply means that we are trying to change this criminal legal system so that it's more fair, it's more just, and is more ardent, for Black, brown, and poor white folks across the United States of America.
And by what measure, by what channels do we go about doing that? We see a lot with attempting to push new legislation, get new laws in. But it seems almost as if we can't touch it, so to speak, right? We hear it, we see certain things on the news about it, but how do you get involved, let's say at the grassroots level, at the ground level, in order to really and truly enact change? Because I think now we need to understand the steps.
Yeah. So look, there are many grassroots organizations that are out there who are doing the work. Grassroots organizations such as, it really depends on where you're from, right? I was formerly at an organization called Cut 50, where it was a national based policy reform organization, co-founded by Van Jones, and now I am over at the Reform Alliance.
Mm-hmm.
And essentially, what we do is we help the people who need the help on both sides of the spectrum. The Reform Alliance, the focus is more specific to probation and parole, while Cut 50 is looking at larger systemic change. But the fact of the matter is that just because we're a national organization doesn't necessarily mean that it takes us out of the conversation, and it pulls us away from those people who are grassroots organizers.
Mm-hmm.
So when you're talking about being involved, I think that first and foremost, you have to ask yourself, what's your why?
Right.
What's your reason for wanting to be involved? The second thing is that what do you want to be involved? What category of reform do you want to be involved in, and with? The third thing is how much time, how much time, how much dedication do you have up to being involved? Does that involvement look like, hey, I'm just going to retweet stuff that you guys put out? Does it mean that I'm going to be, reposting things that you post on Facebook? Does it mean that you want to show up to the Capitol on lobby day where you can legislate for a particular bill? Does that mean that you want to submit testimony based off of your own experience with your loved one and or yourself who has been impacted by the criminal legal system? And then last but not least, I would say, being involved is beyond a moment. It's really about a movement. And so, while there are things that makes good for trending on Twitter, when they happen in real life, we need that sustainability.
Mm-hmm.
We need to keep that momentum.
Do you find that do you find that in the last 5 years that you've had the experience has been that people sometimes will tend to get involved in the moment but not in the long haul?
Yeah, I mean, look, people have busy lives.
Yeah.
If this is not your full-time job, you need a full-time job.
Mm-hmm.
And so while I do think that there is space, and while I do think that there is a necessity for the moment, it's people like myself who has to convert that moment into a movement. And so, many are called, but few are chosen. Many are called to the moment, but few are chosen for the movement. And it's not necessarily because there's a lack of or a lack of willingness, but just people have lives, and people really don't sustain something that they haven't been personally impacted by. So, for instance, unfortunately, the mother who loses her child to gun violence is probably going to be a more fiercer advocate for gun control than the father who hasn't lost his child to gun violence. And that's just, the nature of humanity. When we see a reflection of ourselves in an issue, we become more closely attached and aligned to it.
And that honestly is very true. It's like we find the passion in the actual cause, but it's like, what do you find that will actually drive you to become a part and drive you in order to fulfill what it is that is absolutely needed? So let me ask you this, just to backtrack just a little bit. What do you find for right now, in the moment that we are in right now? Where do you think is the largest need with regards to reform, period? Do we start with the police? Do we start, or do we continue to silo everything and say, you know what, this group we're going to focus on over here, this group will focus on over here? Like, do you find that we need to at least have a larger impact in one area and then branch out?
Well, look, the police literally hold the key
Mm-hmm.
that locks and unlocks our criminal legal system. So, people don't find themselves in a courtroom without interacting with the police.
Mm-hmm.
People don't find themselves in prison if they don't interact with the police.
Mm-hmm.
People don't find themselves shot if they don't interact with the police. Mothers don't get a call and a notification through media or social media that their sons are not coming home tonight or the night before or whatever day without them having been shot down by police. So in my mind, I think that in order for us to begin the starting point, it has to be with police reform. All roads in and to and through our criminal legal system begin with the police. And dare I say, it even ends with the police. Look, if you have had police contact and you were arrested and you ultimately were prosecuted and convicted, you do your time and you come out. That
Mm-hmm.
officer has the power, if he sees you and if he has an axe to grind, and if you are on some form of supervision, essentially to violate you. And I don't mean violate you in a sense as to where he or she would be a parole officer of the sort, but police officers know that incidental contact with law enforcement can potentially trigger a technical violation.
Yep.
And so, in my mind, I think that the road to reform begins and ends with police and reform.
So let me ask you this then, because now we have an entire movement um, in order to say that we need to defund the police. And oftentimes I've seen it up and down my timeline. I've seen it based on a commentary when you say defund the police. People do not fully understand what that absolutely means when we say, you know what, we need to defund the police. You know what, we need police reform. We need reform in America for how policing is done, right? I went over to the UK, right, last year, right before Corona hit, and I went over to Scotland, right? Police in Scotland had not discharged their weapon in an extremely long time. It wasn't until last year there was a person wielding a knife, and the person, subsequently, stabbed a couple people, that the police actually engaged in deadly force in order to unarm this person. And that was such big news for the UK, for Scotland, because their police are not trained to shoot first. Where do we start here in America where it seems like the second an officer feels like they are threatened, it's automatic shoot first?
I don't know.
Yeah, me either.
I don't know. I think that we have to begin with training. And when I'm talking about training, I also mean by recruiting as well.
Mm-hmm.
I think that police need to be more assertive in recruiting people who come from areas where we come from, right? And they don't recruit there because most times what they end up finding is that most people who come from areas where we come from have felony convictions, which automatically exclude them from being involved in law enforcement. But I think that there's definitely, something to be looked at as it relates to recruiting. I think that there's something to be looked at as it relates to not just an initial training in the academy, but I think that all officers should be required to have some form of community training even before they become an officer. They need to have X amount of community service hours within the community that they're serving annually, even if those community service hours are maybe 16 hours a year or something to that degree, right? And then you have the community write an evaluation report, and that evaluation report should go in that not only in that officer's file, but it also should be credited towards that officer's annual review as well.
Mm-hmm.
And community does not feel as though that officer is a part of their community, then I think that there should be some type of corrective action.
So let me ask you this, right? Because sometimes what we have is, okay, sometimes, and I've heard the story from a few different officers where they are expected to police differently in our areas compared to, let's say, other areas, right?
Yeah, that's for me. That's code word, right? Let me just stop you right there. For me, that's code word for stereotyping, for racial profiling, etc. Right? Like, so, like, you can miss me with that. As far as I'm concerned, they are expected to treat white folks who are in suburbia better than how you treat black and brown folks who are in the inner city. You can miss me.
But what do you say? So the message to officers who basically make that claim is they can miss you with that then, right? Because at the end of the day,
I mean,
how do you justify it?
Well, look, what end up happening is that people will, officers are going to cite statistics. Oh, well, crime statistics show that there are, more shootings happen on Martin Luther King Drive on Thursday, Friday, and Saturday night than it does on, on Westbury Lane. And that very well may be so, but you treat people how you treat people. People are going to be people no matter where they are. And I think that there's definitely a more assertive and a more aggressive approach to policing when it comes to their interactions with folks who are in urban communities as opposed to those who are in suburbs.
Yeah, no, I would definitely agree. And I think part of, like you said, part of the issue is training, right? So whether or not the expectation is there, I mean, I've heard uh, some pretty bad horror stories, you know, concerning officers whom choose not to, right? You have officers that would literally choose not to stereotype. You have officers that would choose not to go along, you know, with the code and be like, no, I'm not just going to treat them any kind of way just because. And then you have those types of officers that are then subsequently singled out and I guess you could kind of say punished because they don't go along with it. I think that when we say defund the police and we say police reform, all of that got to come from the top because everything that these officers do comes from the top. And I think that's part of the issue. The issue is that the top is so corrupt. You have these police commissioners that are corrupt. You have these mayor's offices that are corrupt. You have all of this top level corruption that literally trickles down. And we don't necessarily see it, but it's all known and it's all understood and it's covered up very well.
Yeah, well, look, I think that it has to come from the top, but I think that it also has to come from the so-called bottom as well. People are only going to do what you allow them to get away with.
Mm-hmm.
And our communities are allowing departments to get away with the things that they are getting away with.
I agree.
We don't show up at city council meetings when it comes time to discuss police budgets. We don't show up, and the police departments know this, right? We don't show up to file complaints en masse when we know that there's a corrupt officer in our community. The first thing that we want to do is say, you know what, like I don't even want no problems with this dude. You know, I don't want nothing to do with it. We'll do with him or her. They're going to get their day, etc. Right? We don't show up the way that we are supposed to show up. And so what ends up happening is that these individuals can continue to hide behind whatever so-called institutions of corruption that are out there because we don't show up. So I don't think that is necessarily a top-down approach. I think that it's a bottom-up, top-down approach, and we're supposed to meet and we should be meeting in the middle.
Okay, so basically, from what I just heard you say, we have the responsibility as well.
I mean, look, this is our community.
Yeah.
Like not as well. I think that chiefly, you know, we have a responsibility. The police are there to protect and serve us. We're not there to protect and serve them. We're not sworn officers. And so we should have a responsibility. Like we, you know, it shouldn't. We shouldn't discharge the responsibility of policing themselves when we understand that inherently the infrastructure and institutionalization of policing is corrupt.
You're right.
Yeah, we have a responsibility. Like 1 and 1 is either going to make 11 or it's going to make 2. Either way, it got to add up to something.
You're right. You're right. So I think for us as a people, we have to become more involved, and we can't keep taking the mind frame and the standpoint of, like you said, having the police themselves. At the end of the day, we know when there's city council meetings. We know when we need to go down to city hall. We know when there's budgetary meetings taking place because all of that stuff is public knowledge and it's public information. And I believe now we're so much into the information era that we have no excuse anymore. And we either want change or we're going to continue to lie down and take BS, basically.
Well, look, I think that us being in the information era has definitely made us more complacent.
Yeah.
And more inactive than, you know, we discharge our responsibility onto somebody else. Somebody else will do it. So, you know, somebody else will post about this. Somebody else will do X, Y, and Z until it's your child, until it's your brother, until it's your baby daddy, until it's you. And then you are going to want someone to stand up, speak out, and vocalize uh, uh, their displeasure for what happened to you. So look, I know that I'm a little bit short on time. What I do want to say is this. I think that no matter where we are,
Mm-hmm.
I think that we can be better than how we were before. What we have seen, especially through corporate, as it relates to the George Floyd uprising and the movement for Black Lives, I think that we've seen corporations respond in mass
Yep.
ways that we didn't see them before. And the moment that you start hitting people's pockets, they start paying attention.
Right.
In the same way that we demand representation in commercials, on cereal boxes, and things to that nature, all of that stuff is cute, but none of those things save lives. And what's going to save lives in our community is when we know that there are officers who are in our community who are not showing up the way that they have a solemn sworn oath to show up. We need to speak up. We need to speak out, and we need to stand tall as it relates to making sure that those people who are doing, who are dishonoring their badge and dishonoring the oath that they took and dishonoring the uniform, that they are not on our police departments in our communities.
I agree. So I believe that we have a true call to action at this point, and we have a call to truly stand and force change. And the only way that we can do that is if we do get more involved within our individual communities. And if we get more involved with what is actually going on, we have to force the decisions to be made. And we can't keep allowing the police to tell us what they are and what they are not going to do, when at the end of the day, their job is to protect and serve us. And we are the people of the community that they are working for, which is why they get paid with tax dollars in order to police and in order to serve the community. And I think that is one of the things that we need to fully be aware of and take charge of, is that at the end of the day, half the crap that we worry about doesn't even matter, and the things that we need to worry about, we don't worry about. And that's a huge problem. And a lot of what goes on in our communities is our problem, because it's our money that funds it. Our money funds the corruption. Our money funds the murdering. Our money funds people being, erroneously locked up, or, people getting trumped up charges, people going to jail for extended periods of time compared to, let's say, their white counterpart. Our money funds all of that. So if we begin to truly take ownership over the fact that this is our money that funds it, then we would take ownership over the fact that we have the power to change it. So thank you.
Thank you so much. I appreciate you. And thanks for having me on.
Of course. Have a good night. Thank you, guys. So I just want to tell you guys that, we need to take more action. It's okay to keep talking about this stuff. It's okay to keep posting up on Facebook and Instagram and Twitter, Black Lives Matter, justice for so-and-so. But we all have a individual charge within our communities in order to truly enact change and force change. Just like he just said, at the end of the day, these officers, they work for us. I don't care what they say. I don't care how arrogant they are. I don't care how ruthless they are. At the end of the day, we can be even more ruthless because we have all power. And if we truly begin to stand together and rise together and stop acting like they are the ones that get to boss us around, or you just need to comply with them. No, their compliance lies with us, period. Period. And we need to start enacting that. I don't care how arrogant or cocky that officer is. You take down his badge number. Some of us really and truly do need to start riding around with cameras in our vehicles. Record everything. And you want to know why? Because it's time for accountability. No one we're not in the age right now where people are not accountable, period. Everybody needs to be held accountable, down to these corrupt lawyers, down to these corrupt judges. Everybody needs to be held accountable at this point. Everybody. We need to begin to hold these public elected officials accountable. I don't care what high school diploma you have and that you entered into an academy with. You do not get to murder not anybody that's even remotely connected, not anybody in our communities, not anybody in our families, not anybody. You don't have the right to do that unless you're actually being threatened. Okay. Look at what just happened with this young man, 19, 20 years old, with a 1-year-old son, a 1-year-old. And you want to know what he was pulled over? Want to know what he was pulled over for? Obstruction of view. Now, anybody that knows anything about the police, when they pull you over for obstruction of view, it's because they're looking for something else. You are just not pulled over for obstruction of view because you have an air freshener hanging off your rearview mirror. 9 times out of 10, they're searching for something and they want to give you an extra ticket for something. So what happened with this young man? Something was wrong with his insurance paperwork. His tags weren't right. He had just got the car from his mother. Read up on the story. Because some of y'all post some of the dumbest stuff, but you don't post what's real. And that's irking in and out of itself, but it is what it is. I get it. It's social media. Y'all allowed to post whatever y'all want. But read up on stuff. And when they ran and saw his warrant, guess what he had a warrant for? Because he got caught smoking a blunt and he missed a fine. So this young man got murdered mistakenly by an officer who assumed she was tasing him because he chose to get back inside of his car. Maybe he wasn't really trying to take off when he got back inside the car. We don't know. Because the minute he got back in the car, it wasn't like he was closing the door. Look at the footage. I posted the footage. Look at it. There were like 3 officers. They had the door open. She fired a shot straight at him. Talk about, I'm going to tase you. I'm going to tase you. I'm going to tase you. Taser, taser. But then you fire a shot. Does not a taser and a gun feel different? I don't know. I'm not an officer. And you know what? I don't hold guns. I don't like guns. But I would think, I know I had a taser. And I would think that a taser and a gun would feel 2 totally different ways. How do you mistakenly shoot someone and you meant to tase them? This is a problem. And then I know we have y'all ones. Well, how can you say Black Lives Matter when there's black on black crime? And I'm going to say this. Those of you who speak that, literally, you make my ass itch. And I'm going to say why. 9 times out of 10, not even 9 times out of 10, statistically, this is a proven fact. There's more white on white crime in white areas. Why? Because you're more adept to commit a crime against those in which you are in close proximity to. So all of you dummies who keep running around here with this is black on black crime, shut up. That has been debunked. Because in a white area, there's white on white crime. In a black area, there's black on black crime. In a Spanish area, there's Spanish on Spanish crime. If you are in a Chinese area, there's Chinese on Chinese crime. Look at the statistics. Some of y'all don't study data. All you study is running off at your mouth saying stupid stuff because you're uneducated. And what I cannot stand is having an uneducated conversation with anyone. I can't do it, and I won't do it. So I'm just throwing that out there right now for anyone that wants to comment or say something slick about, well, there's black on black crime. We know. But we need to get educated because guess what? Even with there being black on black crime, there's a reason for it. With there being white on white crime, there's a reason for it. Study the statistics in the area. What crimes are happening in those areas? And then why? Where's the funding in black neighborhoods, in Black areas, in predominantly Black cities and towns. Where does the funding go? Check the money trail. It leads you everywhere. And it'll lead you to some of the most corrupt places that you would never would have thought. Check the money trail. We always worried about the wrong stuff. Worry about where the corruption lie. How about that? Worry about that. Okay? Because the truth of the matter is that we have a serious problem with policing in this country. We have a serious problem with gun control in this country. We have a serious problem with the criminal justice system in this country. And until we begin to truly unpack it at its core, I was looking into the entire criminal justice system. Okay. They said that you got 5 pillars of the criminal justice system: community, law enforcement, prosecution, the courts, and then corrections. We, the people, are the first arm of this criminal justice system. Community. Half these folks won't get to corrections if we build up the community. That's real. Some of y'all frowned upon the Black Panther Party when the Black Panther Party first existed. But let me tell you something. What they did was they kept crime out the community. They kept drugs out the community. And they kept violence out of the community. But y'all wouldn't know that because you watch too much TV and don't fully understand the real Black Panther Party. Party for the people. Y'all don't fully understand the young lords. Y'all don't fully understand anything, because you don't educate yourself. I think it's time that we truly do begin to educate ourselves, because the 3 goals of the so-called criminal justice system was set up for justice, to control crime and prevent crime. Well, what happens when the system is causing injustice? What happens when the system is out of control with crime? What happens when the system can't prevent anything? What happens when there's break within the system that it can't fulfill its ultimate goal? See, in organizational leadership, what we learn, okay, is when there's breaks within our processes, what we learn is that when there are barriers to our process, we learn that we need to figure out what those barriers are and what those breaks and those stops are in order to remove them. What did we do within the criminal justice system? No, we just ignore them, act like they don't exist. That's the problem. I believe the entire criminal justice system needs an entire value stream mapping at its core. And we need to find all the loopholes, all the barriers, all the breaks, all the cracks, all the corruption, all that is wrong, and correct it. But we can only do that because we can only start that when we start with us. And we start demanding certain things. Let me say this, because I see half y'all be on Facebook and stuff, always wanting somebody to vote for y'all. I'm not voting for not one of y'all if I don't see that you are enacting change within the community. And don't tell me that you have requested to have more police on the street. I don't want to hear none of that. Tell me what you have enacted, okay, that would drive change, that would drive hope, okay? Tell me what you have enacted that would cause a change within the community that you so-called are so, proud of and loving. Because I see all these people, especially for Paterson, New Jersey, especially for Newark, Orange, Irvington. I see all y'all on Facebook asking for the people's votes. And I don't see y'all, half of y'all, I don't really see what you do. And I'm just being honest. I really don't see what you do. So I think that there's a lot that we need to start doing. I think I am going to even begin myself posting a lot of information about locally for the various different towns when there are town hall meetings. I think we need to get moving. One of the things that literally came to my mind when I saw Dante Wright, I have a 20-year-old nephew. And I could not imagine my 20-year-old nephew being pulled over by police and him getting shot to death. I literally was glad that my nephew is not in this country right now. I was glad that my nephew is not in this country. I was happy that he decided to leave this country. Happy. And I should not feel happy that my nephew, an American citizen, does not live in America. But I cannot guarantee that America will keep that black man safe. So it's a shame. It is a shame. It is a shame that a mother has to bury her child because her child had a warrant for smoking a blunt. It is a shame that in this country in 2020, we saw a man being murdered live. It is a shame. And that wasn't the first time, because we're not going to keep sitting up here acting like that was the first time. Because we also saw Eric Garner be murdered live. Tamir Rice, murdered. Trayvon Martin, murdered. Sandra Bland was murdered in prison. Breonna Taylor, murdered. Bolton Jean, murdered. How do we keep rattling off names? How? Like this is normal. How? And there are hundreds more. And you know when this started? Think about it. It was open season on us since we got to this country. And it's only gotten worse. We had slave codes, we had black codes, and then we got laws. Study history. Before you become a statistic, we got to wake up. I'm trying to tell y'all. I should not be happy that my nephew is not in America. And I am terrified because I got a 16-year-old nephew. And Lord knows, I feel like he got an attitude like all of us. I love black men, and I want our black men to know that, listen here, black men, I love y'all. I support y'all. And I care about your life. We got to care. And we got to change. We got to do something different. We got to do something different. This is too much. Because I'm tired of screaming justice. No justice, no peace. No. Mm-mm. Everybody last year y'all started bearing arms. Y'all started really bearing arms. But the truth of the matter is, the war ain't against the people. It's not. That's not the war. The war is not against the people. The war is against this system. So, what you gonna do with the war against this system? This ain't a war that you need a gun for. This is a war that you need a mind for. This is a war that you need resilience for. That's what this war is about. Because one of the ways that they've been winning is the fact that we get tired. And we don't get tired to where we keep fighting. Look at, you know how many posts I have seen with people coming against the Black Lives Matter movement? Oh, so and so she bought 4 luxury houses. Oh, what are they doing with the money? What are you doing besides posting information that you don't know is factual or not? What are you doing? You don't like the founders of Black Lives Matter? Create your own movement. What are you doing? Part of the reason why we cannot rise above is because we come against our own. We did it. We've been doing that since the beginning of time, truth be told. We ain't like Marcus Garvey. We ain't like Booker T. Washington. We ain't like Nat King. We ain't like nobody. It's been done in history. We ain't like Malcolm. We ain't really like Martin. We don't like Huey P. Newton. We don't like Bobby Steele. We don't like Jesse Jackson. We don't like Reverend Al Sharpton. We don't like nobody. And you wonder why we're where we're at. Because guess what? As much as them people did not agree with everything that Donald Dump said, they rode. Period. Full agreement or not, they rode. And here us, we infighting. We coming up against our own. We putting out information against our own. Look at us. That's what's wrong. We don't know how to band together. We accuse each other of some of the most vile things, corruption, steal. Like, really? With no facts, no proof, no nothing. That's what we do. And we got to stop because that's why we're not getting ahead. You want to get ahead? Stop coming against our own. You want to know something? You want to know what's going on? Get involved. Get involved at the grassroots level. And then if you see the corruption firsthand, correct it firsthand. Or we expose it and let it be dismantled. But we don't dismantle without having a backup plan. That's what's wrong with y'all. Y'all trying to dismantle every movement without a backup plan. There's no backup. We don't like the NAACP. What do you like? We don't like the National Action Network. We don't like that. What do you like? Outside of hearing your own self speak, what do you like? You don't even know. Figure it out. Because while you bickering and coming against, we dying. And I'm not talking about just a physical death, mental, spiritual, emotional. Look at our communities. Stop. It's time for us to organize, y'all. We got to do more. We have got to do more. Well, this was my impromptu, y'all. Thank y'all for riding tonight. We will be back Wednesday. And I believe we're going to continue the conversation. I really want to continue the conversation about prison reform, about criminal justice reform, about gun reform. I really want to continue the discussion because I believe that it's an important discussion, and I believe that it's one that we need to have. And and what's crazy is, like I said, I've been meaning to have this discussion for weeks, and not on the back of anything, but it just so happens that now look at where we are. So we need to get somewhere and get there fast. Because you know what, every black man doesn't have the option to leave America. Okay, so we need to figure this out here. You know what I'm saying? Whatchamacallit? Joe Biden was not our, great hope. Kamala Harris was not our great hope. Like, we are. We have the power. So we need to act like we got the power and get to it. All right, y'all. Have a good night. I will see y'all back on Wednesday. Until then, stay safe. Everybody, love on your kids, love on your family. Just love, 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 love. That's the only thing I could tell you. Love. Um, and we will get through this. So good night, y'all. We will get through it.